Okay, so in this video we're going to be addressing DNS issues based on troubleshooting. This is the last section of section 3, testing and troubleshooting, in objective 304. So we're going to break this out into two parts, but really they're relate to the same problem. So we'll address these in the next few slides. The first is config change to correct server monitoring flapping, and second is proper IP address choices for iQuery. Let's take a look at that blueprint. 304, address DNS related issues based on troubleshooting and log analysis. The examples included applied config change, monitor or prober to remedy flapping of server objects, and then address proper IP address choices for iQuery communication between devices. Now, as I said, these really go hand in hand, so we'll address both of these in the next coming slides. And as we reach the end of the testing and troubleshooting section, it leaves little to be addressed after we went through a lot and covered a lot of ground in section 1, 2, and 3. So let's say we're really going to end with this example. Okay, so let's start out by identifying GTM server object flapping. Now, flapping can indicate one device is not able to determine the state of a big IP object when another device is already doing it. So you can see this when two devices or two F5 devices use a similar monitor or a prober pool, and it's tied to an insufficient, or what I like to say, far away data center. And you can use a troubleshooting tool curl, and add the time feature to validate the proper response time between two DNS servers. Okay, so let me demonstrate. So we have this, our DNS device right here in data center 1. Okay, and then we've got generic host down here. And we'll just say this is host 1. And then basically all the way across the continent, pretty good drawing, right? Okay, so basically across the continent is our other DNS device. I should say across the country, because if you're using private links, okay, so both DNS devices are monitoring the generic host 1, but this one is coming from across the country to do it. Therefore, it's getting, these two are in a sync group together, like sync group. So they're sharing statistics information, but they're both forced to monitor that generic host, and one of them is getting just crazy response time. And you can check that by maybe doing a curl, including the time, to check the status of host 1. So if it was an HTTP, you do time curl HTTP, and if it's like 10.1.1.1 is the host. Okay, and that's going to tell you if the response time is adequate enough to keep it monitoring this host, or just force the monitoring to just be on DNS1. Okay, and for the second candidate of server object flapping, we can look at an incomplete iQuery mesh. So first, we can verify that all the GTM server objects are green, and if they're red or in an unknown state, this is high likely a chance where you could have some server object flapping, talked about in the previous video. And we want to make sure we're using the correct IP address when we set up the GTM big IP object. We don't want to use the management IP of the GTM. We don't want to use the floating IP. What we want to use is at least one self IP address to define the big IP DNS object. And this is going to be used to source GTMD requests for iQuery. Okay, so let's walk through an example of identifying if that server object is added correctly. If it isn't, let's go ahead and correct it. So the first thing we want to do is check for a valid non-floating IP. And we can do this in the GUI or via TMSH, the command line. Do a list net self and then grep for local only, and so it catches local only right here, and then it's gonna give us the additional 5 lines before it using the B flag. Okay, this is just a quick way to get it. Alright, so you can identify that the non-floating IP address is 10.0.0.100. Okay, to identify what the server object is itself, we could list the GTM server and then the server object, in this case the GTM1 at site 1 server. Okay, the addresses associated with it is the 10.10.10.10, and this, from our example, was our management IP. So an incorrect IP is identified here, and we need to replace it with a correct non-floating self IP. So you can do this in the GUI if you choose to do it via TMSH. You do a modify and then the GTM object, and you replace the addresses section and replace all with our correct non-floating self IP. It is recommended to use the GUI for this because it seems like the addresses command has been deprecated from version 14. But I wanted to, this command will work for a lot of common object replacing. So if when you're trying to replace all items in a current path, you can use replace all with, just like this, to do that. Okay, so that's an example to correct the GTM server object flapping, and in this case it was related to an incorrect IP address assigned to the server object. Okay, so that's going to finish off our section 3, test and troubleshooting. Up next, we're going to jump into section 4, talking about operations and support, in which we'll talk about big IP DNS configuration backup, restoring the big IP DNS configuration properly, SNMP polling, and upgrading the big IP DNS platform properly. So I will see you in the next one.